practice or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, welcome to the Modern Financial Advisor, a podcast brought to you by Trulytics, the premier transition management and business optimization platform for the wealth management and insurance industries. My name is Mike Langford, and I'm the host of the newly named Modern Financial Advisor podcast. You may remember that the show was called the Valuations Podcast, and in last episode, I mentioned that we're going to be renaming the show, and here we are, Modern Financial Advisor. Now, the name change was, as I mentioned last week, kind of one of the things we discussed internally, that we didn't want to pigeonhole the show or give people the impression that the show was only about valuation. Valuation is still important, but it's only one facet of what the underlying tool, Trulytics, does for advisors and the firms, wealth management firms that advisors are affiliated with. There's a whole host of other things that we are hoping to help you accomplish. And as a result, we said, let's change the name. And did a little research, did some analysis, and said, all right, listen, financial advisor needs to be in the name. It's going to make it easy for people to discover. We want people to know that this is a show for that community. And more broadly, by the way, agents who are dealing with individuals as well, life insurance agents and so forth. This is for you as well. We just don't want a name that's too long. But the term modern, and I have used this phrase very frequently over the last decade or so. I use the phrase modern financial professional or modern financial advisor, or occasionally modern wealth management firm or what have you. And I've been using that term for the last decade because what you start to recognize is, as you're out there evangelizing adoption of new technologies, and 10 years ago, I was out in the world evangelizing the adoption of social media for wealth management firms and their advisors, agents, and wholesalers. And what you see is what is modern is always what's today and tomorrow. And helping people modernize their business is what we're really doing here at Trulytics. We're helping you get your business current to where the expectations of that business should be today, to make it palatable for a potential successor either today or in the future, right? To help get you set up for today and tomorrow. And so it's really important to us that we kind of put it in that context of being modern, right? Because being modern means you are set up for the current business landscape and the current client expectations of you as an individual and your business, right? Again, look back 10 years ago, social media was relatively new still, but it was gaining importance in people's lives and in most of the business world. But the financial industry was lagging because of some concerns about compliance or regulatory ambiguity on the topic. But I spent a lot of time evangelizing that and it's something important for advisors and firms to do. And now when you look at most firms, most have some social media presence. Not everybody's using it as aggressively as they should, given the importance of social media in people's lives and the amount of time that they spend on those platforms. But any modern firm, especially one that was starting today, would absolutely have social media as part of their strategy. Similarly, mobile, right? The iPhone is only 12 years old. So 10 years ago, not everybody was walking around with a smartphone and using it to the fullest. But today, 2019, heading into 2020 very soon, you need to assume that if a prospect or client is reading your email, they're doing it on their iPhone. You need to assume if they're visiting your website, they're visiting your website on your iPhone. You have to have your business structured in such a way that they have the ability to contact you on their phone, because they may not, it's actually possible that they may not sit down at a desktop or laptop computer all that often. They may prefer to use their phone as their primary internet and communication device. They may not even have a landline anymore. In fact, many people don't have a landline. I don't have a landline anymore. So mobile's incredibly important to the modern financial advisor in the modern financial business. And so the things that we're talking about here on this show, if you go back on previous episodes and look at this episode and the ones in the future, are all about executing to become and stay modern, in your business. And today's guest really fits the first episode since we've changed the name to a T. It's actually could not have been more perfect that today's guest is on the show. Her name is Shanna Tingom, and she runs a firm called Heritage Financial Strategies in Chandler, Scottsdale, and Tucson, Arizona. They have 3 offices. And she reached out to me via email, mike@truelytics.com, as I always ask people to do. I was so excited to get her email. And her email is only a few sentences long, but it just caught my attention like you wouldn't believe. She says, "Hey, Mike, I'm reaching out to you because, I'm really leveraging fintech a lot in my business. And I've been listening to your podcast, and we're currently in the process of acquiring another firm, and we're using Truelytics as part of that process," which is super exciting to hear that. That's always probably going to get you to the top of the list of getting on the show, by the way. You mentioned that you're actually using Truelytics. I'd love to hear from you. That'd be wonderful. But she's her team. They use Cambridge as a broker dealer. Cambridge is a client of Truelytics, so super exciting stuff. But there was a sentence in there that just caught my attention, like you wouldn't believe. She mentioned that they are having an incredible close rate, and their clients are of much higher quality when they come through her website, like when they fill out the contact form and book a meeting via her website. They were seeing such better results than they were in terms of booking a meeting for any other way. And I was like, really? That's fascinating. I got to chat with this lady. So we jumped on the call immediately. She's amazing. I love chatting with her. And then we booked the podcast and we did the podcast. So I don't want to spoil everything there, but it's really exciting. And I really want you to listen to Shanna's story here, because she has embraced the notion of building a modern practice to the fullest. And some of the things that she's doing, you can easily implement in your business. In fact, she makes a couple of tips. And then, as she'll mention, her and her husband basically runs the business. They have a consulting firm, because so many people at Cambridge and beyond have asked her, "Hey, how are you doing this? I'd love to have your advice and guidance on how to do some of the stuff you're doing in your business and implement it in mine." That they basically created some packages so that advisors can basically copy what she's doing and do it for themselves. So without further ado, here is Shanna. Well, Shanna, thank you so very much for joining me on this show. I'm really excited to have you, and particularly excited because you heard the clarion call of, "Hey, let me know if you want to be on the show, suggest topics for the show." And you reached out via email, mike@truelytics.com. And it was awesome to hear from you. And you had a really compelling story. I was very interested in it. And you're working with Cambridge Investments, which is one of our clients. So I was really excited to go, "Hey, let's chat."
Yeah, I'm super excited to be on, Mike. I appreciate it.
That's fantastic. So, one of the things that really popped in your email to me, where I was like, "Oh, I want to dig into this," was the fact that you mentioned that you are seeing a much higher success rate, if you will, from prospects who their first point of contact with you is via your website. And not only is that success rate in terms of them converting to new clients higher, but the quality of the conversion is higher, right? They end up being much better quality clients as well. And so I wanted to dive into that because, as I told you yesterday in our prep call, I have some suspicions as to why that is. But I really wanted to just kind of kick things off there, because I think it's a great way to capture our listeners' attention and really get them to kind of walk this journey in this conversation with us.
Yeah, that's a super question. So I suspected for the better part of a year that this was the case, because when I would see a prospect in my office that myself or my staff hadn't talked to, I just felt like they were more compelled to work with me. And I also felt like they had a higher needs or a higher level of assets. It was a gut feeling, though. I didn't really know. I didn't have the data to support it. And I undertook a little bit of a research project with my own appointment setting process and really dug into the data around it. And that's when I discovered that I was right. And it was dramatically so that those folks that came in that booked themselves versus one of us booking them and reaching out, or them reaching out to us via email and then calling them, closed it at a much higher rate, but not only that, but their revenue was so much higher when they did become clients that it really shocked me, honestly.
That's fantastic. So, what I mentioned to you yesterday that I thought was, kind of my instinct, right? That this is probably the reason why you're seeing such successes. Knowing what I know about the way human beings go about evaluating whether it's a product or a service provider, in the case of a financial advisor, the way we go about researching and evaluating anything now is to do a little bit of research online, right?
Mhm.
So we'll go check you out on LinkedIn, we'll Google you, we'll come to your website. We might look to see if there's a video or two or something that kind of gets us a feel of like, what's this person like, or what's this company like, or how does this product use and how is it compared to others? And so my suspicion was that if somebody is the first time they're going to reach out and talk to you and inquire about your services, if it's via your website, chances are they've kind of gone down a little bit of that journey already, right? They've already done their evaluation and now they're taking some time to reach out.
Yeah, I think it can be summed up by strike while the iron's hot kind of a deal. And I find this happens with me, right? If I'm looking to redo my backyard or looking at buying a new car and I'm online on a Sunday afternoon or a Monday evening late and I'm looking at the options and I have an option or a couple of options and one I have to call the office the next day or email them and wait for them to email me back, and the other one I can just book a consult online, chances are I'm going to go the path of least resistance and book the consult online. And it's also a pretty good likelihood that by the next business day, I've forgotten and moved on to something else. So I think that that's a big part of it. I think you're right.
It's 100%. It's just my conviction is that is true. So to your point, right?
Mhm.
Waiting for somebody to get back to me and this kind of open-ended, maybe I'll hear from them, right? Because
Mhm.
by the way, we've all filled out that form online
Oh my
where like,
Lord.
hey, contact us, and nobody at said company actually is monitoring that, email address, and you
Right.
never hear back from the company, or you hear back from them like 5 weeks later, like, hey, you filled out a form.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're booking a meeting, and by the way, before we go too deep, what's your can you share your website with everybody so that if they're like, wow, this sounds interesting, I want to go check it out.
Yeah, for sure. So my website is Heritage Financial AZ because I'm in Arizona.com. And you'll see schedule a consultation there. And that's sort of my first step in the process that a prospect would book with me when they go to my website. They have to fill out what I call a gatekeeper form. And I think honestly, that's the key to this whole process, which, we can talk about that whenever you want to. But I really feel like that is a big, big part of my success with this process. And then once they give me a little bit of information about themselves, they can book an appointment right there. And it can either be a virtual appointment, meaning they can sit at home in their jammies and we can do a virtual meeting, or they can come into one of my offices and meet with me in person. And they can do that on their own time at their leisure.
I love that. Let's talk a little bit about that gatekeeper form, because again, in our conversation yesterday, it came up, and I think it's so important because very often I've heard from advisors one of the big frustrations they have is they'll book a meeting with a prospect, and that meeting ends up being a waste because the prospect isn't really right for them. In other words, they wouldn't be doing the prospect or their business a service by taking them on as a client. Whereas you're kind of making sure you triage that ahead of time. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. And this was born out of necessity. When I first started my independent practice about 4 years ago, I had a link on my website that you could just book an in-person initial consult with me. And I found that it's something like 80 to 90% of those folks were either not ready for me yet, didn't really need a financial advisor, financial planner. Maybe they needed a CPA or a financial coach. Or just weren't a good fit for me. And I was spending a whole lot of my time in meetings that weren't productive. So I developed this process with a form that they fill out that has some conditional formatting. And that conditional formatting, if they have less than $250,000 in assets, they're offered a phone consultation first, and it's 30 minutes. If they have more than $250,000 in assets, then they're offered an in-person or a virtual meeting first. And that's sort of my first hurdle. Because the other thing that I realized as I was looking at my book of business that year was that those folks that had less than $250,000 in assets, while I'll take them on as clients, had a much higher no-show rate for the initial consultation than folks that had more skin in the game. So I kill two birds with one stone kind of with that conditional formatting.
That's really interesting. And the funny thing about that is when you go up into like big financial firms, it is very common. Like I'm talking about the Fidelity Investments of the world and the like.
Mm-hmm.
It's very common for them to have tiered service based on AUM or the type of business you do to them. If you're an active trader and you're producing a lot of trading revenue, of course, you're going to get more attention. Or if you have a lot of assets, you're going to get a lot more white glove service. And I think that's where we're headed as an industry, right? In order to scale and grow your business, you are going to occasionally take on clients with less assets and in hope that they're growing, right? But when they have less assets, they're not as profitable. They just aren't. It's just a reality of how our business is structured. Unless you're somehow taking charging a flat fee for every client, regardless of assets. And I haven't met many advisors that are doing that business
Mm-hmm.
model. And frankly, it doesn't work all that
Mm-hmm.
well. So yeah, you kind of have to do it. And I think it's a smart concept to do it.
Yeah. And, I charge for financial planning as a separate service from AUM. And so I have a service model for everybody, but I have to make sure they're a really good fit and that they're going to have some skin in the game. And I don't want to charge somebody a financial planning fee if they're not all in. And so that's my first way of determining if they're all in. If they show up for the phone consult, we have a good conversation and they're open to the idea of paying for financial planning, then I'll bring them into my office or do a longer virtual consult to really dig into what I can do to help.
That's fantastic. We touched on something about the close rate as well earlier. And one of the things that I really do believe improves that closing rate for clients is, once you've gone down this journey, you've scheduled a meeting and you've carved time out of your life to either get on a virtual conference or come in person or have you go meet them in person. It's a reasonable investment of your
Yeah.
life, right? You've now gone down this journey. Like, hey, listen, I got to get all my paperwork together. I've booked an hour of my life or 2 hours of my life, whatever they're doing, or half an hour for that initial consult. It's pretty serious. You've already made a purchasing decision. I need to talk to a financial advisor, or I need to switch from my existing advisor to a different one because I'm not happy with my existing
Mm-hmm.
one. You've made this decision, and now it's almost your business to lose when they walk in the
Yeah,
door.
I 100% agree with you. I think by the time somebody gets to the point where they want to take time out of their day, leave work early or, go to work late or take a lunch hour and come see me, they've already made the decision that something is going to happen in most cases. And so, once they come, I think they're, we've all heard for years in sales training that people make decisions emotionally and then justify it logically, right? I think that the coming into my office is them justifying that logically they can trust me with the emotional decision that they've already made to work with me.
It's 100% true. And I've said that very frequently to groups of advisors that, look, you have the same products as everybody
Yep.
else. You have the same general process as everybody else. I mean, financial planning, we're all using one of only a few handful of financial planning software solutions, right, to manage those financial plans. The reality is, when somebody sits down across the table from you, they're choosing you because they trust you, because they like you, they feel comfortable with you, that you're the person that can help them along their manage their financial life and achieve their life goals. And one of the things that I think is also helping you be so successful is the videos you have on your
Oh,
website.
thank you.
I mean, I checked out your website, spent some time there. Well, to me, it's one of the things, and I've been trying to champion this for the industry for a long time. It's like, look, a lot of financial firms, you go on their website and there's this very person in a suit sitting at a desk, talking about the bullet points, and it's very monotone and bland, right? Very little emotion. Almost none of the person's personality comes out in the video most times. What I love about the videos that you have on your websites is I feel like I already know you. when I see
I
you.
have that.
And
I
that's a
hear that
positive.
from prospects all the time. Like it's clear that because I can tell I have the system that I have set up. I can tell what videos they've watched and what emails they've read. So it's a bit creepy, all of the information that I know about somebody before they show up in my office. But they often, more often than I expect, they will say, we'll be talking about something, and maybe I'll bring up that I scuba dive or that I'm from Iowa or something, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I know that was in your video," and I'm like, "Oh my god, you're watching my video." It's a little bit weird, but that's exactly what I wanted to create when I did that video. It's really to help them understand who I am as a person and why I do what I do. Not that I'm smart and have a whole bunch of letters after my name or like whatever everybody else is talking about. I don't care about that. I want to be different. I want them to have a connection to me personally.
That's so important, and it's often overlooked. But I've tried to evangelize this from the other side for a
Mm-hmm.
long time, frankly, is that, social media, as an example, that's the greatest business intelligence tool you've ever had in the
Oh
history of
yeah.
mankind. And many advisors aren't using it. And what I mean by that is, if somebody books a meeting with you, before you ever sit down with that person, you should spend 10, 15 minutes seeing what you can find, like Googling
Mm-hmm.
them, going on their Facebook page, going on their LinkedIn page, seeing if they're on Twitter, seeing if they're on Instagram, get a feel for like who this
Mm-hmm.
person is, what's their family situation, what are the things that are interesting to them. So when you're sitting across the table from them, helping them plan their life goals, you can say, well, look, if you like going to the beach and they like going
Yeah.
to the beach, you've already looked at their pictures of them at the beach. Or if you like, uh, hiking in the mountains, you've seen a lot of hiking in the mountains or going out to eat and all those types of things. You can actually get a reasonably good
Mm-hmm.
picture of the person. Now, some might say, well, that's creepy. Let's like, no, well, you want to know the person. It's one of the reasons why many advisors like to meet at the
Mm-hmm.
client's house is because they can see all the pictures on the wall and get a sense for like, how's this person living and what's going on there. I always look at it like you do this, you could do a little research ahead of time, but for you've set up a situation where you've made it easy for the prospect to get to that point where they know you, like you, trust you, they feel comfortable with you, and they know you're competent, all wrapped into one by just experiencing what you have on the
Oh,
side.
well,
I
thank
love
you
it.
so much. It's my website's been a labor of love and it's going through a rebirth as we're talking on this podcast. So, it's a constant work in progress, but I really think that is sort of one of the biggest fails that most financial firms have. And I think that there are a lot of great out of the box solutions out there, but what I'm sure you see, and I see it too, is that some 10 firms in your market will use the same template and have the same picture of the, vacationing couple on the front of the yacht or, the lighthouse or like whatever the stock image is of the year. Right. And that doesn't give the prospect a warm, fuzzy feeling when they're going to 3 or 4 advisors to do research and they look the same. I mean, I can't tell you how often I get the comment that like your website really spoke to me. And that's what I was going for when I built it.
That's great. That's great. Well, it's just a recognition of the fact that prospects are going to
Yes.
land there. Right. This is not about you trying to puff up your chest and prove to everybody how serious and how, like you said, how many letters you have after your name and so forth. It's like, no, 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 no. This is you trying to create a connection with somebody to the point where they feel comfortable and they click that
Yep.
book a meeting button. That's the
Yep.
whole point. Um, Now, kind of switching gears just a little bit, you mentioned that you found Truelytics
Yes,
through Cambridge, and that you're currently in the process of acquiring
I
another
am.
practice, and that you're using Truelytics to kind of facilitate that process, and it's been useful to you. First of all, I was thrilled the fact that that's how you found us and that you're using the tool. I wonder if you might be able to share your experiences with that because it really does build upon a lot of the stuff we've been chatting about, which is your use of technology and so forth, and how it's helping you grow your business. So we've talked a little bit about how you've grown the business
Mhm,
organically
mhm,
using technology. But now we're talking a little bit about, hey, listen, you've made a decision to grow through
mhm.
acquisition. And in doing so, you're not leaving technology out of that
No.
equation either, right? You're going to leverage it to the fullest to make that happen. So I wonder if you could kind of share a little bit about that process,
Yeah.
to the best you can. Obviously, you can't share proprietary or certain things that are maybe in the NDA and so forth. But anything you could share would be great. I'm sure people would love to
Yeah,
learn a little bit about.
absolutely. I guess I wasn't really looking for an acquisition. One found me. And, we actually started this conversation in February of this year, if you can believe that, and really just sort of tiptoed through it. And we were in the process of trying to come up with a valuation because it's a bit of a different practice. It's very similar to mine, but also with a heavy fixed annuity side of the business because my new soon to be partner whose practice I'm purchasing is a old insurance guy, comes from a insurance background. So he had this whole second business that my broker dealer didn't really know how to handle, and him and I understood it, and we understood the revenue potential, but they didn't really. So what we used Truelytics to do was we put in all of his numbers. He did actually put in all of his numbers and kind of arrived at a net present value and a discount value that the software allowed us to go, okay, we're on the right track here with what we're thinking this value is. So so that was super duper helpful in our negotiation process.
Yeah, coming up with a common valuation is just so important, right? Like it's kind of like having speaking the
Yes,
same language, right? You
exactly.
come to the table with we all agree what the facts are at the moment, right? And it's we've talked about that a lot, with the team of one of our expectations. It's not even a hope anymore, just because we've made so much progress. It is now an expectation. Is that Truelytics valuations and the KPIs and some of the other things that we're working on will become standards in the industry. And so it's much like when somebody looks at, everybody understands PE ratio as an
Mhm.
example for a stock as a common way to express the value of a stock when comparing it to others. Well, similarly, when we're looking at the Truelytics valuation, we want that to become something that is commonly accepted and agreed upon is uh, directionally correct, right? Within the, a pretty close proximity of what it should be. Now, one can also start getting into other pieces of the valuation, whether it's branding and, some other assets that might be outside of the net present value or something like that. But it just really helps for everybody to have an agreed upon
Oh,
set of standards.
absolutely.
That's
And
our
I
hope.
think that also helped me really look at my business and realize that all the stuff I've been doing over the last 3 years, while sometimes feels extremely overwhelming, someday down the road, when I look to sell this business that I've built, having the systems in place that we're talking about today is just going to make my business that much more valuable. And so it was really helpful on two different fronts.
That's a really important point. That systematizing things makes you
Yeah.
more valuable, and the reason for it is it's pretty plain. When you think about if you're coming in to buy a business, the easier it is to just take the system and
Hmm.
keep it going, keep that cash flow stream moving,
Yeah.
the better, right? The more valuable it is, but also just the more attractive it is for acquisition. Like even if you take valuation out of it, just one could agree like, hey, this is the valuation, but that would be a pain in the butt for me to buy a
Right.
business, right? So I'm just not going to. It can be valued at whatever it is. It's kind of like any other asset in the world, right? You could look to buy, residential apartment building for an income property, but if it's going to be a pain in the butt to manage because of either its location or some other weirdness of the building, let's stay away from it. So in the case of your business, like it's
Yep.
got to be a process, right? It's got to be a
Yeah.
system in
And,
place.
and I think
That's
that the other
fantastic.
thing that we had to think through that we didn't really think about until almost the end of the process was, well, if this is a 5 year transition and I'm buying this book of business, there should be some discount applied if my predecessor is for some reason has to step out, whether he passes away or has a health issue or something during the transition period. Well, that discount looks different if it's the day after we sign versus in the third or fourth year of the transition. And so that's one of the things that I think systematizing allows us to do is my hope is, in 20, 25 years when I go to sell my business, it will be at that point running as if I didn't exist. And so that the discount that I had to think about in this acquisition, I won't have to think about when I go to sell.
That's fantastic. So let's talk. Let's you kind of just fast forwarded to like a potential exit in the future, let's talk about the on-ramp to the business. And I usually tee this up at the beginning of the podcast, but I thought I like the way that we were able to kick things off a little differently today. But I'd like to just kind of talk about your journey to Heritage Financial Strategies. And because you mentioned you've been independent here for 4 years, you're with Cambridge now, but you've also mentioned that you kind of unexpectedly created a secondary business that's a consulting firm. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about that journey. Because not only am I interested in it, but I think listeners are interested because it sounds like you've got something it's running the way that many modern financial advisors are looking to run their business or hoping to get their business to, but also you are now offering help if they're struggling to get there. So I'd love to kind of, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that journey.
So it really wasn't something we set out to do, honestly. About 2 years ago, I had 2 almost full-time assistants, and one of them, their role was pretty much managing my prospect to client pipeline. They would make all the phone calls, schedule the appointments, send out all the emails, all of that. I run 3 different Dave Ramsey SmartVestor territories, which means that I get somewhere between 150 and 200 leads a month, and I'm the only advisor in my practice. So that piece required almost a full-time employee. And through a couple of different decisions that I made in my practice, both of my almost full-time assistants moved on to other opportunities. And I hired a couple of people that weren't good fits, and I ended up without an assistant. And what that required me to do was to figure out how to do this all on my own. I outsourced a lot. I used some virtual assistants and picked up help with programming and some of the tech stuff when I needed it. But for almost a year, I ran with no internal assistance and just on my own. And that required me I rebuilt everything from the ground up. I was using WealthBox as a CRM at the time in cooperation with a marketing CRM, HubSpot. I got rid of WealthBox, went straight to HubSpot for my entire practice, built a ton of automation within HubSpot so that I didn't have to manually press a button to send an email to do certain things with prospects and clients. And I just really took advantage of all of that automation and built out, I think I now have 55 or 60 different automated workflows in HubSpot that run anywhere from the prospect to a client leaving the practice. So there's a ton that's automated that happens without anybody in my practice intervening. And I kind of figured that out all on my own. I learned a little bit about Zapier. I hired folks from Upwork or, one of those websites when I needed help and it was above my pay grade. Thankfully, my husband is also in technology and does a lot of this integration stuff for large government agencies. And so when it was above my pay grade, but I didn't want to pay somebody to do it, I let him figure it out.
Different kind of honey-do list,
we have
right?
a teamwork site that's our honey-do list. When I have a problem, I give him a task and he fixes it. So so
that's awesome.
So really, that was the genesis of this. And I started talking to other advisors within Cambridge about what I was doing, and they were intrigued. And I'm willing to give free advice to anybody that'll listen. And I started doing that. I started having Cambridge advisors book time on my calendar. And sometimes it was an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I'd walk them through everything that I'm doing. And then 6 months or a year later, I'd run into them at a Cambridge event and ask them how it's going. And I got the deer in the headlights look. And they were like, oh, it was just too much, Shanna. It's just too much. I can't do it. And I realized I was giving away a lot of time that wasn't useful. Because nothing was getting done. So that's where the consulting business was born. We kind of put together a flat fee structure, much like my financial planning agreements are in my practice, where we can get somebody up and running for far less money than it cost me to figure all this stuff out on my own.
That's nice. It's really so funny. You and I chatted about it yesterday about like, very often when you give somebody advice, if they don't have skin in the game, if they haven't paid you for that advice, or if they haven't really thought through the implementation of taking the advice, even if they
Mhm.
paid you for it, sometimes it doesn't get done. And it sounds like you've solved that, number one, the first problem by, hey, listen, now you have to pay me for my advice. I just don't give it for free. My time is valuable. The knowledge and in the experience that I have developed over time, I
Right.
paid the dues, right? And so you should pay me for that. But also, helping them do it versus them being left up to their own devices to do it is a
Yeah,
really smart approach.
absolutely. And that's kind of why we do it the way we do it. We will do all the research and integrate with as much of their existing technology as possible and recommend new technologies where they need them and they make sense. But then we do all the work of getting it done in a way that allows them to integrate it into their practice so that we can then step back and let them figure out their processes around the new technology that we've helped them implement. So we're really having a lot of fun with it. I don't spend a ton of time on that side of the business because my job is really to talk with the advisors and show them what's possible. And then once they're ready to move forward, my husband takes the ball and does all the heavy lifting on the technology side of things. But it's really cool getting to see some of the change and the transformation in some of the practices we're working with.
That's great. So that's funny. You answer one of the logical questions I'm sure some advisors may have is like, well, how do you have time to help out, potentially competitors
Mm-hmm.
in some respects? I mean, if, more broadly, and most of them are probably not in your backyard, but like, how do you have time to do that while running the business? And obviously because it is your insights coupled with your husband's
Yep, that's
firepower,
exactly it. I
getting
couldn't and probably
it.
wouldn't do it on my own because I'm all into my practice. And because I run very lean, it takes up a tremendous amount of time. But this is something that I was doing anyway and might as well get paid for it.
Right, exactly. So, kind of, we were getting close to the end here. I wonder, and I like to do this, by the way, because I speak to a lot of advisors at conferences and so forth, and tons of seminars over the years. And one of the things I always like to do when I'm going to be in a room full of people, and I look at this podcast as we're in a room full of hundreds, if not thousands, of people for every episode, is I like to give them like one or two or maybe three action items that they can do, like something that they feel like I listened to this and now I can go do something and move my business forward. What is a tip or two or three tops that you could recommend to somebody that they can get the ball rolling in the right direction, that maybe they could do
Yeah,
on their
absolutely.
own, that's
So
easy
I
to
didn't
do?
mention this before, but I will now because it is a natural fit. The technology that I use for my gatekeeper and all of my automated onboarding is Precise FP. And I think it's one of the best kept secrets in the financial services industry. It's a piece of software that was designed by an advisor for advisors, and it's two-factor authenticated. And it really allows you to take the paper shuffling out of the equation and really do that digitally. And so if you go to precisefp.com, they usually give out a 7-day free trial. But if you tell them that you heard about it from me, they'll give you a 30-day free trial. And the code that you need to give them is Shanna Tingom 30, and they'll give you a 30-day free trial. Play with that and test that out. I use that for my gatekeeper. I use that for all of my automated onboarding. So if a client wants to work with me on a financial planning engagement, they fill out the form that I've created, attach all of their statements, send it back to me digitally, and it totally eliminates me having to go back and forth and ask them for this statement or that policy or any of that stuff. It really just cuts the time down that it takes me to create a financial plan drastically. So that's really one of the best kept secrets that are out there. And then the second thing that I would recommend that you do is to look at the pieces of technology that you have and see what can currently talk to each other and integrate. For example, I use eMoney for financial planning, and with Zapier, which is another one of the best kept secrets out there, it can talk to other pieces of technology. So, those are two big ones. And then if you're not using an automated scheduling software like Acuity, my gosh, get with the 21st
Mhm.
century, people. I mean, for real.
It's funny. Like, I often tell people, listen, it's 2019. We're moving into 2020 here very soon. And if you are interacting with your clients digitally and making it easy for them to do business with you, in this case, book an appointment with you, share documents with
Mhm.
you, as you mentioned, you are really putting yourself
Yeah.
in a bad way, right? Because, I've done a couple of episodes where we've talked a little bit about millennials on the show. And the reality is many of them are in their 30s now. Some of
I
them are in their
know.
late 30s and entering their prime earning years. And so I know it's easy for an advisor who may be a little more senior on the back nine of their business, if you will, of their career, to go, millennials. But it's like, no, wait a minute. These are people with like starting to have real money. Um, and they are mobile first generation. So if you're not on their phone, if you don't have a good mobile experience, if they can't book a meeting with you on their phone, and I don't mean
Yeah.
calling you, I mean pulling up a web page and clicking book a meeting, you may be missing out
Oh,
dramatically,
absolutely. Your
right?
clients that
Uh,
are in that age bracket are used to being able to book an appointment with their dog groomer and their doctor online. Why the heck wouldn't you give them that same experience?
That's right. Exactly. And it may seem, I know it feels overwhelming at times, and you've given a couple of really good, easy tips to start with. It often feels overwhelming, but it's take one step at a time. Try one little thing. I think you're absolutely 100% right. The first thing to do is make it easy for somebody to book a meeting with
Yeah,
you
and
on your
even if it's
website.
just a prospect,
I would
right?
say
Like, you decide who you want to start with, whether it's prospects or clients. Some people start with clients because that's the low hanging fruit, and set that up, get them used to booking their reviews with you online, and then move into the next phase. You don't have to eat the elephant all at once. You eat it one bite at a time.
that's right. That's right. That's right. And I would say, like, my last little thing, and this is one of the things I celebrated you for at the beginning of the show, is consider putting some videos up there that show you as
Mhm.
the real you, right? Don't worry about overproducing them. Don't you want to have reasonably good light and reasonably good audio. Uh, you know, put some nice clothes on. You don't have to look overly fancy though. You don't have to be wearing your most expensive suit or whatever. Have a little personality, make people feel comfortable that you're there. I love how you let people know what to expect with their meetings and so forth, and the experience of working with you. Super duper helpful. I love that you share some of your backstory there. Be willing to do that because your clients are coming in or prospects are coming in and they're going to be very vulnerable. It's like going to the doctors when you meet with a financial advisor, right? It's for many people, a very uncomfortable
Yeah.
conversation to have. And anything you can do to make them feel more
Yeah,
comfortable is a win.
absolutely. Almost worse than going to the doctor, honestly, because it's like I often joke that I have an undergraduate degree and two graduate degrees, and none of them are in marriage and family therapy, and I wish they were. Because that would be infinitely more helpful than a business degree or a management degree.
That's
And
funny.
because people
That's
really are vulnerable. That's why I have Kleenex in my office. I mean, it's not unusual. So anything you can do to break those barriers down before they get to your office is just going to help you close and close with the right clients.
perfect. So, in closing, to wrap things up, you recently launched a podcast. I saw that on the website. So,
Yeah.
awesome to give that a plug. So that's fantastic. How'd
Thanks.
that come about, by the way? It looks like you're a couple of episodes in.
I am. I actually started one about 3 years ago, and it got to be too overwhelming, and so I kind of restarted it here a few months ago, and I am absolutely having a ball with it. You can find it on Apple, iTunes, or pretty much any place where you find podcasts. It's called Making Money Fun, which is my tagline, by the way. I have a lot of fun with what I do, and I want my clients to have fun too. So my goal is to make money fun for all of them. So that's the podcast, and I would love any of you to subscribe or listen to it and give me any feedback because I'm always looking to improve. That's the key with any of our practices is that we always have to find the ways to do better.
Perfect. And so, beyond the podcast, people can find you at Heritage Financial
Yep,
AZ.com. And
yep,
then
you got it.
I assume you're on the socials. People want to reach out to you on social media and the like.
I am. Yep, absolutely. All the socials. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. And you can email me to at Shanna, SHANNA, at heritagefinancialaz.com if you have any questions about the consulting work that we do or any of the technologies that we've talked about or anything like that. Feel free to zap me an email or send me a message on social, and I'm happy to chat with any of you.
Perfect. Well, this has been wonderful having you on the show. I want to thank you tremendously for reaching out
Oh, you're
and being a
welcome.
part of the experience here. Um, Well, great. Well, thanks.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me. I
The worst
appreciate
ending
it.
ever, right? That's stuck. That's so funny. It was great having you on the show, Shanna. Thank you again.
Oh, hey, thank you so much, Mike.
All right. Huge thank you to Shanna Tingom for joining me on the show today. And most importantly, thank you, Shanna, for reaching out, as I encourage everybody every week to reach out with topics and suggestions for guests. And that suggestion can be you. If you've got something really interesting to share with the audience, love to have you on the show. Feel free to reach out to me, mike@truelytics.com, or you can ping us, go to truelytics.com and fill out the form there on the website, or hit us up on the socials. We're always looking to hear from you. Love to hear about your experiences in your business, what you're finding is helping you succeed with your experiences with Truelytics, some of the things that you're working on, or really love to talk to you about if you've gone through a transition recently where you've acquired another business or sold your business. Love to hear about that experience and some of the lessons learned over time. That would be wonderful. As always, feel free to subscribe and like the podcast on whatever your preferred podcasting platform is, iTunes or Apple Podcasts now, right? Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play Store, wherever you get your podcast jam on. And then lastly, click the like button on social and give it a share. Let somebody know that you like the show. Share it with your colleagues. That'd be wonderful. We're always looking to expand the audience here. Okay, well, until next time, we will see you on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.